through fiscal year 13, which means that we'll be getting your audit in probably October of 13, November of 13, somewhere in there, and you truly made a surplus. Your financial plans going forward and still continuing to show a surplus, basically where you're making gains and living within your needs and so forth. As we go forward, we can discuss and see, and with the recommendation to go to the board to basically decertify the district. Because I can see now that from, you had negative fund balances in fiscal year 11, but you've had, for fiscal year 12, you've turned that around and your fund balances are positive now. So that looks like that's an ongoing trend for 13, 14, and so forth for the district.
So at a minimum, 2 more fiscal years.
We at least have to get through fiscal year 13 to see where the district's at, yes, because it's only been 1 year that you've had positive fund balances, yes.
And I think we're kind of using financial watch interchangeably here. I understand what you're saying about the financial watch designation on the profile, but basically the oversight and what it takes to be decertified is really, we want to understand at what point will you say to the state board, this is a district that no longer needs to be certified in financial difficulty. What do we need to do, and what would the time frame be for us to basically become decertified from financial?
I would say we'll see how strong the fiscal year 13 ends, basically with the actual audit, and where you actually are going to be basically, are you continuing to surplus, are you continuing to increase your fund balances, have you obtained fund balances back that can help sustain the district, and do you have good financial plans in place for the future to make good sound decisions? Then we can go forward and make the decision to take to the state board.
And so we would basically have to give you our annual financial report, and that would be reviewed, and it would be determined at that point to recommend for decertification?
Yeah, at that time, then you'll be well into your fiscal year 14 year. We'll be able to determine, are you on target for your fiscal year 14 in accordance to the plan. Be able to say, the district has, well, at that point in time, it would be actually 3 years of surpluses, 2 years of positive fund balances. They're on target for their 14 year to continue another year that way. So it does look like the district is striving and making good financial judgment.
And can you tell us, is that determination made in the fall, just after the AFR is submitted? Does that come in the winter, the following spring? What's really the time lag from the time you receive the annual financial report to when that decertification is processed?
Once we get the annual financial report in here, my staff has to go through it all to determine that there's nothing missing or anything from that there. And when that comes in, Susan, we can begin talking to each other and after to see where you're at. You can begin to get the information for where your actual fiscal year 14 budget's at and actual reports and that give you trial balances so that I know where the district's really at, and then we can begin discussing at that time. So the time frame usually when the audit comes in is due to the regional, in your case, the ISBE by October 15th and to the state board by November 15th. We could definitely start talking about probably in December, January, somewhere in there to see where you're at and what your fiscal year 14 looks like.
Okay, thank you.
I'll keep going. When do we have to go to you for permission to do certain things? I know we wanted to do a interfund transfer, and it's permissible by the school code. Is that something we would have to go ask permission for in the future? Not that we're going to do it, I'm just trying to determine when we have to ask for permission.
If you think that, and the superintendent and I did discuss that today, if you do think there's a need for an interfund transfer, there is a place that you can put that for other funding sources and that you can talk about that in the narrative of the plan, basically.
No, maybe I'm not being clear. When do we have to ask for permission to do certain things that most other districts would be able to do?
Well, basically, you put in your financial plan forward. That's why I'm saying you really, if you're anticipating that you need it, it's better to put it in the plan because when they approve the plan, then that would basically be giving you the permission to do those things. That way you don't have to come back to the state board again to ask for it again. If you're anticipating you're going to need an interfund transfer, I would document that in your plan.
Okay. Last question, I promise. What do you consider borrowing? Is it just TAWs or leases, things like that? Or do you differentiate between the two?
Could you repeat it, please?
What do you consider borrowing? Are we talking about short-term borrowing? The borrowing you're referring to?
If there's any anticipated borrowing, whether short-term or long-term for for fiscal year 14, that's not in the plan, yes, we definitely need that in the plan. Again, I would like the sound plan is going to sustain the district for a year. So if you think you're going to have any borrowing, the borrowing definitely has to be approved and fund transfers and that stuff there. So if you're thinking there's a need of it, and that's what usually a district does in their budget each year at the beginning of the year too. So that's why the plan and the budget should be mirroring each other, and if you're anticipating any of these things, it should be built within.
I was referring to capital leases. Is that
Oh,
something?
for like the copy machines and so forth like
Things
that?
like that, yes.
Yeah, no, those are operational and that there, and basically your agreement, that would be within your expenditures.
All right, thank you, I'm finished.
Thank you. Karen? Any other questions by administration?
Deb, I do have one question for you. We had put in a request for 5 additional certified positions a year ago, February, and no action has been taken. We've not heard anything from the board, state board. As we move forward, we may find that we want positions beyond those 5 that we originally requested. How do we go about capturing that in the plan? Do we write that as just the number of positions we need, or is that in addition to the 5 that are pending in our request? What would you recommend for that?
Basically, what happened there was we needed, we didn't, I know the original one came through for 5, and there was a discussion about some other ones and things like that. Since that happened, now where you're knowing that you want, I would just write in your plan what you're wanting to do for your staffing needs and what that means for your plan overall. If you're wanting 4 additional staff, then write in 4. If you're wanting 5, write in 5. If you're wanting 6 or something like that, you might want to explain what the positions are, what you're doing with them. But definitely you have to explain the impact to the budget and what that's doing to your budget.
So should we assume that that initial request for 5 that was not responded to, should we just consider that to be dead and start?
It's not, I would say that basically because as we talked and things like that there, it was my understanding we never really got a final plan for how that impacted it or anything like that, their kinds of stuff. So I would assume that if you're still wanting to hire those 5 additional staff, you definitely build it in your plan and you increase your expenditures, what it would cost you for those 5 staff. If you're wanting to increase it 6 staff or something, you're going to have to build in your salaries and your benefits and so forth for what it's going to cost you for those additional staff and see how that plays out against the bottom line of your budget. If it comes down and you 5 or 6 additional staff with the reductions in revenue and so forth that we talked about, shows that the district won't have a surplus, okay, then tell me if you want the 5 additional staff, where are you going to make cuts elsewhere to basically continue with your budget improvement?
Okay, thank you.
So I assume, now that you brought that up, that's good, I'm glad that you brought that up. Does that mean that we have to wait for approval from the state board before we do any hiring on it, correct?
Deb, did you hear that?
Again, it has to be within the plan, and yes, this district does have to have a plan going forward.